Order.
Roll call for the City Council meeting of November 2nd, 2016 at 9 a.m. Mr. Mursky, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kwiatkowski. Mr. Jones is absent. Yes. Thank you. Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon. Please rise for a moment of silent meditation and Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of minutes for the council meeting of October 19th, 2016, and bills for payment on October 28th and November 4th, 2016. Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Mursky.
Any requests for repository sales? Please come to the microphone. Just name and address for the record.
My name is Carl Campbell. I reside at 1122 Brewster Street. The property I'm here to discuss is located at 1123 Brewster Street. It's a vacant lot. I originally moved to Erie, purchased the house at 1119 Brewster. Late in the year, got into it. It was a foreclosure. Noticed that nobody was shoveling it, so I started shoveling it in that winter, early 2012. Following spring, nobody mowing it, and it was getting pretty ugly, so I started mowing the lot, mainly because of groundhogs and possums. And ever since then, I've been taking care of that lot, making sure the snow has been cleared and that it's mowed. So I'd like to see about getting that property to, I'm sorry, am I jumping ahead?
No.
What my intent is to consolidate that with my property at 1119. It's currently a rental unit, 2 units. Provide green space for my tenants. It does have debris, I think, from the previous house, concrete, junk that's in there, so I need to get either a backhoe or a bobcat in there to clean it out, and then some of the vegetation where we never really did get into mow. So in the short term is get that cleaned out, and then I want to fence the yard as green space for the tenants. A little bit further out, I've talked to the city a little bit. I'd like to see about putting parking in there for the tenants. There's room for 3 to 4 spaces, but I've got to run that gauntlet for compliance. But the initial intent is consolidate with the property so it doesn't become another wayward lot, and then provide a fenced-in yard for the tenants.
What's the address again?
The address of the lot is 1123 Brewster Street.
Okay. So it's on the east side of the street.
Yes.
Okay. And it's adjacent to the property you own already.
Yes, it is. I own the property at 1119.
Right. Okay. Any questions from council? All right. We won't vote on this meeting. We'll vote at the next meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good day.
Thank you. Any citizens to be heard?
Good morning, City Council. Johnny Johnson, 223 Walnut, Erie, PA. I'm here this morning to just thank you. About 3 years ago, City Council passed an ordinance to honor 2 of the early African-American families in the city of Erie, the Lawrence family and also the family of Harry Burley. I want to say thank you, and I appreciate you for doing that. December 2nd, 1866 was the birthday of Harry T. Burley here in Erie, Pennsylvania. This coming year will be his 150th birthday. There are activities that have been going on in the city of Erie, all over the nation, and also Gene Snyder, who has written the latest book about Harry T. Burley, will be doing a presentation at Smithsonian later on in the year. And I'm here, in fact, as Secretary of Harry T. Burley Society, just to ask City Council, and I'll read this and I'll leave everybody a copy of this, and I'll let you go along with your business. It says, celebrating Harry T. Burley's Centennial 150th birthday, December 2nd, 1866. Harry T. Burley was born December 2nd, 1866 in Erie, Pennsylvania. During the course of Harry T. Burley's life, he brought national and international attention to his hometown. Burley was celebrated during his life as the father of the spirituals. Not forgetting the place of his birth, Harry returned many times when called upon to perform his hometown. Harry has as many books written about him as Erie's founding fathers. To honor the life and legacy of Harry T. Burley, the Harry T. Burley Society is asking the City of Erie, through City Council, to designate December 2nd, 2016 as Harry T. Burley Day in honor of such an esteemed and honored Erie citizen. And this is the information that I'm going to give you. And thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Any other citizens to be heard?
Good morning. Richard Wagner, 4228 State Street. On your agenda today is the first reading to formulate a land banking system for the city. I wonder why there is such a rush. If as a citizen I'm supposed to believe the Buki Comprehensive Plan, the first thing you should have accomplished was input from the citizens with the hope of their buy-in. Instead, we've hired a 6th code enforcement officer, and now you're going to vote on the formation of a land bank. There has to be a rhyme or reason for what you do down here. As far as I'm concerned, we wasted $135,000 on the Buki plan. I hate to repeat the obvious, but a little history is needed. Mr. Elliott, Mr. Bossel, Miss Green, and Mr. Henry all served as the head of the Redevelopment Authority. It has been a dismal failure for the entire length of this administration. The Union Square project has really been a joke. 140 housing units promised. We built 6, and 2 are occupied. They almost went bankrupt. If it weren't for the lead abatement program and the $1 million a year they receive, they probably no longer would be an authority. They couldn't even afford to continue to rent space to house their enterprise. Instead, they sit in City Hall. And the most recent project that the ERA just completed was the installation of 47 windows on the top 2 floors of Juniors at a cost of almost $500,000. That's outrageous. Now you are being asked to vote on forming a land bank that will be handed over to a bankrupt organization. It doesn't make sense. $200,000 as the city's investment in the land bank will let them acquire some properties through a streamlined government taking of blighted properties. If I were to use some of the numbers that I've seen for redevelopment projects in our city, $200,000 is a drop in a bucket for a renovation. You might think $200,000 is a lot of money, but where I come from with my concerns is that Hands Group spent $9 million on the renovation of 30 housing units. That comes to over $300,000 a copy. And I'm sure the ERA will use the same formula as Hands. We need a private, serious developer who understands the value of a dollar. The land bank is doomed to failure if you don't keep a constant eye on what's going on. Another thing that concerns me is the influx of ERA associates in City Hall. The recently hired code enforcement officer was an employee of the ERA. The spouse of the newest appointed director of the ERA, Mr. Henry, works in the engineering department in City Hall. Kim Green's replacement to head up economic development in the city served as the chairman of the ERA board of directors for years. And did I mention his wife had to move to a different department in City Hall because she already worked in economic development? I don't know Mr. Mong. His tenure with the city could be very short. But based on the failures of the ERA, which he directed as board president, I'm not sure where he will lead the city in 14 months. We are at a crossroads in our city's future. We have made numerous mistakes in the past, and it has gotten us to this point in time where we can't make any more mistakes. Every decision has to bear fruit. Every decision has to add value, and yes, every decision has to have a return on investment. Otherwise, the city will certainly fail. So as I stand here today, I beg you to start keeping the promises that you made to the community. Put your friendships aside, leave your egos at the door, and start working to make Erie a place where we can all live, work, and play in safety. You hold all the power. Quit wasting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other citizens to be heard?
Good afternoon, Council. Michael Keys, 3612 Reed Street. I'd just like to comment on the housing bank. While sometimes things seem like a good idea, I always get a little nervous when they're making new rules that are going to circumvent the constitutional protections and the legal protections of property owners. And when the city says that blight is their number one concern, I find that hard to believe when we have a redevelopment loan fund that has $0, when you could take $1 million, put it in that loan fund, help people fix up their houses, and then get the $1 million returned back to the city. And that's not even asking for a grant. That's not even asking for any allocations from none of these benefactors. That's just money that the city could use and then can be returned to the city. And so it sounds like that's not really the city's number one priority, which means that if gentrification is the number one priority, or if urban renewal means urban replacement, then it's a bad idea. You know, it's not the first time the government has said, you know, we'll displace people and we'll give you the land over here and we're going to take this land. You could go all the way back to reference the Native North Americans, where the government said, okay, we want this land and we have a great place for you over here. And you probably can ask most of the Native North Americans, were the reservation lands as good as the lands that they gave up? And so I think that's something that we should cautiously look at. And maybe that what we really need is reinvestment into our community. What we need is home ownership back in the community. We do have a tax sale, but certain families and certain conglomerates and businesses are buying up our city and leasing it back to us. Maybe what we need is restrictions put on the tax sale, where people who are going to occupy the house should be allowed to buy the house and these businesses should not. And maybe it should be restricted to those people and nonprofits and people who truly have a beneficial plan for our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other citizens to be heard? Seeing none, we'll continue on with the meeting.
Ordinances for final passage. Council file number 15966, official ordinance number 28, 2016, an ordinance amending ordinance number 26, 1958, the traffic code of the City of Erie by installation of stop signs at 13 intersections. By Mr. Witherspoon, seconded by Mr. Kwiatkowski, that City Council file ordinance bill number 15966, and now known as official file ordinance number 28, 2016, be finally passed by the City Council. Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Mursky. City Council passed official file ordinance number 28, 2016, finally by yeas 6, nays 0. Ordinances for first reading. By Mr. Mursky, Council File Number 15967, an ordinance amending Part 9 of the Codified Ordinances, Streets, Utilities, and Public Service Code by adding a new Article 959, Land Bank, establishing the Erie Land Bank. By Mr. Mursky, seconded by Mr. Brennan, the Council File Ordinance Number 15967, having been read, is hereby adopted on first reading by the City Council.
Ms. Rhodes,
Yes.
I just wanted to have a brief discussion on this because in listening to the citizens to be heard, there was some misinformation out there. The land bank is not equipped for taking people's houses, and we're not displacing anybody. The only thing that the land bank can do is purchase properties that are on the tax sale and have first preference to purchase those properties to do exactly what the citizen who was speaking didn't want, which is outside conglomerates, if you will, purchasing properties and then leasing it back to the citizens of the city of Erie. This will allow us to control the process and also, if they're able to be rehabilitated, to work with the Erie Redevelopment Authority. One of the other things, too, that was another citizen said that was misinformation was that the Redevelopment Authority is controlling this board for the land bank. That's not true. They have one seat on the board. But it's a board that's made up of other people as well. So by no means is this council rubber stamping anything. And the other thing, too, they said we're rushing into this. We've been studying land banks since 2013. We've had at least 4 study sessions on them. We've looked at what other communities are doing, and we've waited, quite frankly, to see what other municipalities like Allentown and Reading and other municipalities have done in Pittsburgh. Has it worked there? Did they? What kinks did they need to work out? So we did our due diligence here in studying this issue, and what we found is it's not a cure-all based on what other municipalities have told us, but it's one more tool to use to help recoup some of these properties that are falling, because what's happening right now is that you have properties that people are picking up for $250. They're barely meeting code, and then they're renting them out, and they're basically sucking all the equity out of the home, not paying the taxes on them, and then you have to wait 2 years for the tax lien sale. So for 2 years, they're making money on these properties and then letting it go back on the tax lien sale. We need to stop that process. This is one way to do that. That being said, we will review this as we do all our ordinances from time to time to see if there's anything that we need to change. So I encourage the community to stay involved, and if you have any questions or concerns, that's why you have a council. Feel free to talk to any of us, and we'll address those concerns for you. Thank you.
Mr. Mursky? Yes. Councilman Jones and I, when we were at the Pennsylvania Municipal League, had the pleasure of taking in a session where we were introduced to people mostly on the east side of the Commonwealth who have had this project for years. And like President Mursky said, this is nothing new. As a member of the Blighted Review Board, I sat there meeting after meeting after meeting, and the only thing preventing us from acting was their failure to bring it to the council. So it's been studied over and over, and it offers another tool in the toolbox, as you said, Bob, which is they will have the ability to screen people that have the ability and the means to develop property, not just flip it, or in the best case scenario that Mr. Mursky showed, they would rent the houses out in a substandard fashion. This would allow people to renovate the property to a better standard and actually work with people from and around the Erie community. So it's like you said, it's nothing that is a spur of the moment. This has been, since my first year on council, we've talked about this. And like anything, it has to be monitored, and so I'm in favor of this.
Anyone else?
Mr. President,
Witherspoon.
Councilman Kotowski put it so eloquently, and I'll just make it short. Originally, I was prepared to, and I shared this with you at caucus, Originally, I was prepared to vote no for the same reason the citizens this morning had mentioned. But I talked with two individuals yesterday that were very knowledgeable, and they gave me some new perspectives on this, and especially in the area of folks purchasing a house and putting it on a tax roll and then vacate it, or a house that's standing and homeless are using it, or either becomes a drug house, and we have to wait at least 2 years before we can do anything about it. So this should not eradicate, but surely help us in this effort of making things work and building homes for individuals. So I'm very pleased, and hopefully that this will pass.
Mr. President, I just want to add a couple comments onto what was already been said. One of the reasons we're doing this is the city does not have the capacity to buy these properties, and we don't have a fund that we could just purchase properties, put them back into use. So this, again, is another tool to do that. And the goal is to transfer these properties into encourage responsible ownership. And to see private investment. So really, as has been said, it's not going to fix everything, but again, it's another thing that we can do, just like a couple other things the city's doing to bring money to the table to get these properties into use and be able to pay taxes. So I'm voting in favor.
And with that, we'll take the vote.
All right. Roll call. Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Mursky. City Council read and adopt Council File Ordinance Number 15967 by yeas 6, nays 0 on first reading. Council File 15968, an ordinance amending Part 3 Business Regulation and Taxation Code of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Erie by adding Article 331, City of Erie Business Development Revolving Loan Fund, Sections 331.01-333.03, Adoption Criteria and Funding, respectively, to create the City of Erie Business Development Revolving Loan Fund with a $250,000 Urban Development Action Grant funding instrument received by the City of Erie. By Mr. Mursky, second by Mr. Kwiatkowski, the Council File Ordinance Number 15968, having been read, is hereby adopted on first reading by the City Council. Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Mursky.
Mr. President, who seconded that?
That was seconded by Mr. Kwiatkowski.
I'll keep my vote then.
City Council read and adopt Council File Ordinance Number 15968 by yeas 6, nays 0 on first reading. Council File 15969, an ordinance appropriated the sum of $250,000 to be received as a transfer of funds from BUDAG, Bayfront Urban Development Action Grant, towards the creation of the City of Erie Business Development Revolving Loan Fund in connection with the accompanying ordinance number 15968.
Mrs. Roby.
Yes.
Just to explain to the citizens, this $250,000 in the Bayfront Urban Development Action Grant is money that was used on a project with Erie Insurance in the early mid-1990s, and because of the restrictions on the money, it was given from the state as a grant, but because of the restrictions on the money, it's been sitting. We weren't allowed to transfer it to the general fund, but what we are able to do is, with the implementation of our own City Business Development Revolving Loan Fund, we got permission from the state to take that money and fill it into the revolving loan fund to be used in our urban area for businesses that are looking to expand and create jobs in the urban area of the city of Erie.
Roll call. Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Mursky. City Council read and adopt Council File Ordinance Number 15969 by yeas 6, nays 0 on first reading. That will take us to new business. By Mr. Witherspoon, seconded by Mr. Kwiatkowski, resolved by the Council of the City of Erie that the proper city officials are hereby authorized and directed to execute the agreement between the City of Erie and the Housing Authority of the City of Erie for continuation of community-oriented police services to create drug and crime-free environment and to provide for the safety and protection of the residents in its public housing and developments and all other HASTE locations for an additional 2-year term, or 2 years commencing September 1st, 2016 through August 31st, 2018.
Mrs. Roby?
Yes.
Just some discussion on this real quick. Our partnership with the Housing Authority of the City of Erie has been a model of community policing. It's been recognized statewide as a way to get the police out of their cars into the community, and it's been effective. And so we're pleased to put this on the agenda for 2 more years, working with the Housing Authority to create a crime-free environment in our public housing.
Okay, roll call. Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Mursky. By Mr. Kwiatkowski, seconded by Mr. Mursky, resolved by the Council of the City of Erie that City Council will abate the penalty and interest accrued with regard to the 2009 through 2015 city real estate taxes on Erie County Assessment Index Parcel Number 18-050-2620-0620-2130, a vacant lot located at East 30th Street between Wayne and Reed, at the request of the owner, Lauren Coley, 1018 Englewood Road, Cleveland Heights, Ohio, due to an error of a deed transfer resulting in the current owner never receiving the tax bills for this parcel. The amount of penalty and interest does not exceed $175. Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Mursky.
Mr. President,
Mr. Winarski?
vote to move the balance of the agenda.
So moved. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Kwiatkowski.
Any separations?
Seeing none? I'll give you
Moving
a
the balance of the agenda, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Mursky. We have a waive rules, Mr. President.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, voting on waiving the rules, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Mursky. By Mr. Kwiatkowski, seconded by Mr. Brennan. Resolved by the Council of the City of Erie that the proper city officials hereby resolves that the refinance of the issuance of certain bond series and the undertaking and completion by the City of Erie Higher Education Building Authority of all other matters necessary or convenient for the refinancing of said issue by the authority is approved, and it be hereby declared that said refinance is desirable for the health, safety, and welfare of the people in the area served by Mercyhurst University. Discussion?
I just want to let the community know that no city money is being used for this project. What this is basically because the loans are backed by the city interest-free, but we are not responsible for the loans. It's to enhance our academic offerings in the area. We did one for Gannon recently. This one's for Mercyhurst, and it allows them to borrow money at a better interest rate, and we support their efforts in the community.
Okay, roll call. Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Mursky. That'll take us to committee reports, Mr. President.
Committee reports. Mrs. Arrington.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. This past Saturday was Matt V's 4th annual Halloween Fall Festival for the kids. I do this every year for our youth in the community. I had probably about 180 kids. It was an awesome turnout. You know, we got a lot of things going on in our community, especially with the violence and all the issues that my organization, Matt V, focus on is the issues that's dealing with our youth within the community. All the kids had a great time. The parents had a great time. Matt V's next event is November 29th, and that's a coat drive for the Erie community, everybody. So if anybody have any gently used coats that's too small in good shape, please drop them off at the Booker T. Washington Center, because we have a lot of kids and adults that need winter coats. And that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Winarski.
No report this morning. Thank you.
Mr. Kwiatkowski.
Quick report. I attended the Erie Parking Authority meeting, and things are progressing well with the study on the parking meters, and I'm sure we'll have something coming down the pipe shortly. I also had the pleasure of attending the graduation of the Veterans Court, a program over at the county that deals with veterans with legal abuse issues, alcoholism, many things that bother our warriors. And it was a pleasure to see 2 graduates. When you heard their stories, they really their lives really got turned around because somebody paid attention to them and took an interest in them. And we need more of that. Too often we send people off to war, and we don't follow up with them when they come home. And it was an idea of many people, including Michael Dunleavy, the general, also Mrs. Faust, and it's a good program, and I'm glad we have it in our community. And finally, I'd like to thank my council members who oftentimes come under fire for once again being innovative with the revolving loan fund, the land bank, and many other things. A lot of these things have been studied, hashed around for years, and to this council's credit, we have brought more things off the table and actually, started moving them. And I appreciate people like Mr. Witherspoon who have done their homework and work hard to make sure that we try new, innovative things in this community. Because where we are now is not a pretty place. And it's going to take innovative means to start changing and turning things around. And we can't be fearful of trying things, and we can't always just rely on Mr. Buki's report like it was the Bible, because it's not. It's a guide, it's a suggestion, and it's up to council and the community and the private sector to make things work. And these are little baby steps, and I'm glad that we're doing them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I attended the Erie Chamber Celebration of Excellence this past week. It was a great event. There was a lot of the positive initiatives were discussed, a lot of things going on in the city and county. It was last Wednesday or so. Also, GE Executive John Rice was there. He talked about how GE has transformed over the years. There were a lot of good questions that the audience asked of him in regards to the future of GE, so it was good to put those questions to him at that public arena. He also discussed how Erie needs to adjust and transform to the future, so I thought it was a good event to attend and to learn from. Regarding the City of Erie Business Development Revolving Loan Fund, as we stated, a lot of people stated earlier, it'll provide additional funding for business to expand, hopefully providing more jobs, retaining existing jobs. A lot of people, of course, if you're in business, you know this, but a lot of these sources of funding, when you go to a bank, you need assistance to be able to achieve some of the percentages that they require. So this will just add another layer of funding to help out businesses to do that. Being in the construction industry, I know very well that there's always extra costs associated with construction, building additions, renovating buildings that aren't known right away. A lot of the soft costs are really add up, and a lot of extra unexpected costs. So really, this will help businesses, and I think it'll be a good thing for Erie. A couple other things coming up. Veterans Day, of course, has come up on the 11th. So to all veterans, thank you for your service. And the Veterans Day Parade is this Saturday. I think it starts at 9:30, and it starts at 26th and State. Then it will go to the VA Center, and there's a ceremony at 11 a.m. Thank you.
Mr. Witherspoon had to step out to take a call, so I'll go on with my report. Just a few things to report. First off, I attended the McClellan Park dedication for the new trails that are there. This was a joint effort of the Sierra Club, Custom Engineering, the Burton Deal Neighborhood Watch, City of Erie Public Works, and the county contributed Greenways grant money to the project. Over 1.5 miles of handicap accessible trails are now on that 56-acre park, and with plans to expand those trails as the funding becomes available. I really want to just first thank the Sierra Club for spearheading this, and the other thing I want to thank is our city crews. We were able to complete this project because our people, our crews, 3 men did all the work, and that in-kind contribution saved us thousands of dollars in costs that we would have to contract out normally. And our guys did a fine job on those trails. So I wanted to thank our Public Works people for that. I also attended the chamber event that Councilman Brennan spoke about. One of the things that was interesting to me was, for the first time in recent memory, the chamber brought a bunch of Erie expats together, all these people who are business leaders outside, who had their home in Erie where they grew up, but have moved on, they're working for Google, or they're working for Intel, these places, and they came back, GE, that they started here and then moved on. And that was really interesting to see, that, and hopefully what we can do with that is take it to the next level, which is inviting these people who are decision makers now in their businesses to invest in Erie with jobs and relocating some manufacturing or some type of job into the city. So it's a good first step, and I'm pleased that the chamber was able to take that step, and we partner with them on that. With that, I also wanted to say, to piggyback off of David again, John Rice coming in, one of the things that was interesting about what he said is you can't do business the way you did in the 1970s and 1980s and 1990s. The dynamics have changed. And we see that even with government. Because of the cell phone and technology advances, people expect things much more rapidly, and they expect things instantly. So we are changing constantly the way we do business. And part of the way we're changing the way we do business is these innovative things like Councilman Kwiatkowski said, such as the City Revolving Loan Fund, which allows us the flexibility that the state doesn't allow. Right now we have an enterprise revolving loan fund funded by the state, managed by the city. This allows us the flexibility, and it's really innovative in the sense of I don't think any third-class municipality in the state has one. When I was talking with the solicitor on how to set this up, we were looking for guidance, and there was no other municipality that had this type of revolving loan fund. So there are people out there who keep spouting status quo, status quo. There's nothing status quo about this council and this city. We keep moving forward. And finally, I attended the Nonviolence Initiative at McKinley School last Saturday. It was an effort of Unified Erie and the Blue Coats and the police, bringing everybody together for nonviolence and for community accountability. The speakers that spoke were very powerful, and they said it's not only up to the police. It's not only up to the schools. It's also up to the community to stand up and say, we will not tolerate this type of behavior anymore. Not in our neighborhoods, not in our city. And it was a really good event to attend. And I encourage everybody to vote Tuesday's Election Day. Please exercise your right to vote. Thank you. Witherspoon's not here, so we'll go over to Ms. Stankiewicz, Controller.
Thank you. Just to let council know, there's going to be an investment committee meeting November 14th, and then we're going to meet with the aggregate board on November 15th. And then I'll be able to bring some information regarding the pensions at that time at our next council meeting.
Thank you. Administration, Ms. Beck.
Just want everyone to be aware that parking regulations have changed effective November 1st, so be aware of the odd even or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday parking signs in your neighborhood. It doesn't look like it today, but the snow will be flying before we know it. So those parking regulations are to make things easy for the plows to get through the neighborhood areas. And once again, thank you to our veterans for their service. Touching on what Mr. Brennan said, the Veterans Day Parade is this Saturday, and I think you are correct, at 9:30, followed by a service at the VA Medical Center. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.
City Council adjourns at 9:42.
Oh, that's
Mr. Mursky, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Ms. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon.